of Atlantic slave trade, in which millions of enslaved Africans were transported to the Americas as part of the Triangle slave trade. Ships departed Europe for African markets with manufactured goods, which was the first side of the triangle, which were then traded for slaves with rulers of African states or other African slave traders. Slave ships transported the ship. Whoa. Okay. Slave ships transported the slaves across the Atlantic, which was the second side of the triangle. The proceeds from selling slaves were then used to buy products such as fur and hides and tobacco, sugar, rum, and raw materials, which would be transported back to Europe, which was also the third side of the triangle to complete the triangle. According to modern research, roughly 12.5 million slaves were transported through the Middle Passages to the Americas. The enslaved were transported in wretched conditions. The male captives were normally chained together in pairs to save space, right leg to the next man's left leg, while the women and children may have had somewhat more room. The chains or hand and leg cuffs were known as bilbos, which were among the many tools of the slave trade and which were always in short supply. Bilbos were mainly used on men, and they consisted of two iron shackles locked on a post and were usually fastened around the ankles of two men. At best, captives were fed beans, corn, yam, rice, and palm oil. Slaves were fed one meal a day with water, if at all. When food was scarce, slaveholders would get priority over the slaves. Sometimes captives were allowed to move during the day, but many ships kept the shackles on throughout the difficult journey. Aboard certain French ships, the enslaved were brought on deck to occasionally receive fresh air, while the enslaved females were typically permitted to be on deck more frequently. Enslaved males would be watched closely to prevent revolt when above deck. The Middle Passage did not complete the forced journey of African captives. From points of arrival in American port cities, captives were then taken overland or water on lengthy passages that delivered survivors to the mines, fields, and houses of their New World owners. For many Africans who survived the Atlantic journey only to labor in harsh conditions in the Americas, perhaps it seemed that the Middle Passage never completely ended.